So today I'm here to do a spoiler-free review of an underhyped 5-star dystopian gem that I want to share with you all. This is a book I just finished, I loved, but it also destroyed me, and I'm really excited to share it today because I think it will appeal to both sides of my audience because it is a science fiction book as a dystopian, but it also has some very dark horror-like elements to it. So I think that whether you're coming for the darkness or coming for the sci-fi, hopefully this book will scratch that itch. I loved it. It has underwhelming reviews, and I'm coming here to set the record straight that this book is fantastic. Maybe not for everyone, but definitely for me. If that sounds good, let's get started. So if I didn't say, the book in question is Womb City, and this is a dystopian science fiction story set in a futuristic version of Botswana, and we follow a woman who is married, she has a child on the way, she has wealth around her, and just seems to have a fantastic life. However, right within the first pages, you realize that something is horribly wrong. This is set in a world where certain individuals have a lack of bodily control. Essentially, they have these microchips that are implanted, and because of that, they have other individuals, in this case her husband, that really have control not only over her body, but also over her mind, because some of her thoughts get transmitted, and so even the thoughts inside her head are not private, which to me always gives vibes of something like 1984. This book is particularly compared to The Handmaid's Tale, which I'll get to more in a moment, and you can definitely see where these comparisons are coming from just from a plot perspective. And to go a little bit further, this is also set in a world where we have found the technology that allows people to body hop, so their consciousness can be transferred into another body. This is usually someone who is a criminal that is executed for those crimes, and then their body, their young body specifically, is given to someone who is often quite wealthy that is extending their life and moving on. This is often compared to a particular horror movie, which I won't spoil, but I think those of you who watched it know the marketing twist that keeps getting compared here. And so within the story, we follow this person who is not in their original body. They are not with their husband's original body, and instead they met in these forms and are having this life together. You find out that infertility has continued to become a bigger issue, and so even things like in vitro or IVF have become things that are very commonplace, but things that no longer work the way they used to. So now there is this artificial womb technology allowing the inseminated embryo to live in an artificial womb and grow up there until it is ready to be essentially born. And so we follow this story and this woman as she is trying to navigate this very difficult life. In the story, eventually something happens that causes this woman to have to break out of the situation she's in. I don't want to give away more, but this book does move into more of an action plotted story that is going to be high octane, but also again continuing to build off the world that I just described here, and I loved it. Okay, now I'm going to go more into my thoughts, but again, keeping this spoiler free. Everything that I've discussed so far are things that are easily available in the first chapters of the book, the back of the book synopsis, all of that. And so first off, this book clearly has some marketing comparisons to The Handmaid's Tale, and it's not the first book to do that. If you're not familiar, I love Margaret Atwood. I love The Handmaid's Tale. It's a difficult but really important dystopian to read, and again, Canadian over here, so I gotta read it. And so I've read many books, or attempted to read many books, that are said to be the next Handmaid's Tale, and over again they are so disappointing. I don't think I've read one book until this one that actually fit the bill. So this one has a similar plot, but specifically it has a similar tone and style dealing with those themes surrounding female bodily autonomy, and it's done in the way that is clearly reminiscent of it but makes it its own, which I think is a big key here. It doesn't feel like a rehash, a remake, but really taking those own ideas and then moving them into a different kind of future. So certainly there's similarities. You see a lot of religious overtones. Supposedly this woman, her body is cleansed by the experience of having intercourse with her husband, who is of course the holier one in the relationship. So similar kind of conservative ideas going into the story, but again, very much doing things differently and building off a lot of technology, which is woven into the story with all of the insemination techniques and things. But as a whole, I was pleasantly surprised because, again, going into this book with a comparison to one of my all-time favorite books, is tough because you have those expectations that are nearly impossible. Honestly, I almost didn't pick up this book. It has lower ratings on Goodreads, currently sitting around 3.2. I'm hoping that that will increase with time as the right readers find this book. I understand it's not going to be for everyone, which I'll get into more as we keep talking. But for me, this book just worked so well and was just right on the money. It's a dark book, it's a depressing book. So of course this book is not going to be for everyone. It's very dark, it's very depressing. You have to be in a good mental space to enjoy or be ready to read something like this. Thankfully I was. And so I was able to enjoy, and that's kind of a strange way to describe it, a book that is just dealing with the worst of this imagined future and just seeing everything that is crumbling apart and dealing with it all. But this book of course does deal with some heavy subject matter, so content warnings for anyone. Make sure to look up the triggers if you are concerned about something. And it's, again, just not a cozy read. It's not a nice future. If you go for science fiction books that are normally rompy space operas, this is nothing like this. This is grounded in our world, pulling from threads that are already existing today and extrapolating them. Very much this book deals with the questions and conversations surrounding class and privilege, because even those that have the ability to body swap, I mentioned that not everyone actually gets to do this. You have to have money, you have to be in a certain class and have the opportunities to do this already. And even those that get the opportunity to body swap, there's still certain regulations and controls over that. So if someone is of a certain ethnic group or so forth, or of a particular background, they are typically only allowed to body swap into similar bodies. And so it's very difficult, unless you can pay a lot of money, to jump ahead and actually move into perhaps like a white economic class that is going to give them more opportunities. So it's always that you have to already have opportunities in order to get more. You have to have money to be able to continue on and all of this. This book also dives interestingly into a lot of the conversations around how we deal with criminals, because the consequences of a story like this is that the society has gotten more and more punishing on those criminals and extending the use of executions because they need these young bodies, because without them there isn't enough people that die naturally at a young age to support the number of people that are growing older and want this technology. So because of that, we have people who are shoplifting or doing petty crimes that are being punished in the worst way. So in some ways they argue that society has become extremely safe. They say that they virtually removed crime, that it is a crime-free society because everyone fears so much for the punishments. But of course, these bodies still exist, things still happen, people are desperate because of course at the same time, when you have this severe break in class, you're gonna have those at the top and those that are at the bottom. And again, they have no way of moving up naturally, they have no way of advancing their own lives without reaching into criminal activity, which of course if they get caught, then they get into that cycle. And it's just some really interesting conversations that come about with all of this. And on top of that, going back to the body hopping, there also is a conversation about that end of life crisis where individuals can simply just move on to another life. So it's quite common when someone moves on to a younger body, they will leave their elderly spouse behind if they are still living and get to start again with a new hot wife or so forth. And you get, again, all the social consequences that come with it, where being young is so prized. And because of that, you get to see how the old that are not able to move on to a younger body are just tossed aside and seen as less than. So very much that lack of respect and care for those that cannot escape their ultimate fate of their timely death. And so this book hits hard on so many levels. You can tell that there's a lot to consider, a lot to think about. It's the kind of book where I really spent my time with it. Often, especially when I love a book, I can read it very quickly. I feel like I'm gulping down a book and can just read chapter after chapter. But I really found myself pausing after paragraphs and thinking about the ramifications and discussions of all that was happening, just because it was so heavy and it felt like I need to digest it. It wasn't the kind of thing that you just want to binge through, but instead I tried really hard to take my time with it because I really thought that it had some great ideas within it. In terms of the writing, I thought it was well done. It really accomplished everything it's trying to do. I have to look at if this is not a debut novel, but I believe it is, and certainly I thought that it was incredibly strong, and I'm excited for whatever this author does next. And for me, the part that really destroyed me came at the beginning dealing and addressing the conversations around infertility. So I've mentioned on my channel before, it's not a secret that we did IVF to conceive my son. And I went through years of going through the process of failing every treatment before then. And just the societal judgment on me, especially in terms of like a lot of like religious overtones of what God wants from my family and, you know, what it means if you can't naturally conceive, and really questioning my body, the failures of it. It's always on the woman. And so I found this book to be just very emotional because you really have her dealing with the fact that she hates her body. She has no control over it. And even in the ways that she feels like if she did have control over it, things are just happening to her, or in some cases not happening. And everything that leads them to have to do an artificial womb is just very heavy to think about, and just that last failure. And so I really got teary reading this. It's not going to be, of course, as emotional for everyone, but I can say for anyone who's dealt with infertility, this book hits hard. I didn't look up to see if the author was writing from their own experience, but it certainly felt like they did, or at least they have a great mastery of understanding or empathizing with that situation, because they simply were not writing the situation from an outsider, but you felt very intimately aware of what this woman would have been feeling. And for me, at least, I felt it too. I felt every blow, every moment, and I just immediately got so invested in the rest of the story that moves on from there because of the fact that I cared from the get-go with this woman's situation. And then things just go from bad to worse, as you imagine, in a story like this. And I just needed to see it through. I needed to know what was going to happen. And to loop back around to the larger discussion of a dystopian future, we get to see the inklings of this government oppression that has built the societal infrastructure that really, again, puts specifically women and those of, again, lower economic classes and minorities into these boxes. Typically, they are the ones with chips, being controlled by others, not having full privacy of their thoughts, and their bodies not really being of their own. And the interesting thing with all of this, which I think makes the story feel, unfortunately, very believable, is that it is posed in a way that is the chips that are making these women free, that because of this technology, and it gets more explained within the story, it really gives them the freedom to have a full life. They don't worry for crime on the streets. They can safely do everything. But really, when it comes down to it, of course, these chips that are supposed to set them free, we as a reader can very clearly see that they are shackles, that they are another way of controlling them. And just, you see that really the opposite is happening. Our supposedly utopian society is, of course, the dystopian that we know it to be. And I think that this book is great because, again, it's nuanced, it's complicated. I'm, of course, simplifying all of this to describe it on camera to give you an idea of the book, but there's so much more in there. Trust me, I am just scratching the surface of what you will find within the story. And again, it's the kind of book where it's more the experience versus just one little fact. The setup to the story is just where you start, and it goes to a bigger place. This book does have a lot of narrative drive, so while there is time spent talking about the characters and the class and all the things I described here, there is specifically a plot that does drive the story to its end. So if you're someone who needs a bit of emotion in your story, don't worry, it's there. And as for the ending, of course, I can't spoil anything. I really like the ending. It did give me pause to wonder if this was truly a 5-star read, but I'm going with my gut, and I'm going to move this up to a 5 stars on Goodreads just because I adored it so much. I don't quite know what I wanted from the ending, and it's the kind of ending I'll admit that I read a couple times because it was a little bit more loose and vague than the really tight ending I was expecting, but perhaps other readers will pick out parts to it that I missed, or just some meaning to it that was missing there. But I always say I'm a journey reader, and I love the book from start to finish, and just simply the experience of going through it was a 5-star read for me. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to hear if you've decided to pick up this book based off my recommendation, or if you say it's not for you, not your thing, totally respect that too. Either way, love to hear from you down below. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know with a big thumbs up. It lets YouTube know too. And again, drop a comment, hit that little notification bell. And if you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. A lot of you watching my content aren't actually subscribed, so remember to check that button. And let me know if you want to see more long form review content like this. I'm trialing it again on the channel. I want to do it whenever I feel like this, where I'm really inspired and have a lot to say about a single book, and give it some more space on the internet. But I need to know from you if you actually want to watch this. So if you stuck around, please let me know, and we will talk again soon. Let me know what other new releases you think I should check check out because this one was fantastic and 2024 is turning out to be a great year for dark fiction. So if that all sounds good, hopefully you stick around and I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.